for Geek Pride, the special Geek Pride podcast. Joining me today is Justin Achillie. Justin, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Peter. Good to be here.
Right, for those of you who do not know who you are and what you do, could you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Certainly so. I am the brand creative lead for World of Darkness at Paradox Interactive. About 1,000 years ago, I worked at White Wolf Game Studio. I worked on the World of Darkness then and have taken a kind of roller coaster ride through tabletop games and video games, and have now arrived back at a place where, once again, video games and tabletop games overlap in the World of Darkness here at Paradox.
Brilliant. Now, last time we chatted was about this time last year, and you were working on something else completely different. I think you'd just been finished working on Assassin's Creed. And at the time, you said, V5 was a fresh start for Vampire the Masquerade, and it was a perfect time not to carry over any of the previous assumptions. So what made you return to World of Darkness?
I had finished working on, as you say, Assassin's Creed. I had worked on a couple of other titles in between there, some VR titles. I was working on Dune last time we talked for Funcom. And if there was one property in the world that could get me to leave Dune, it was in fact the World of Darkness. And so we had been in some conversations about that. The offer was made. I took the opportunity and moved here to Stockholm. I love the World of Darkness. And as you say, like we were talking about last time, a new edition was a great time to kind of set aside things that were necessarily assumed in the past. And really what I'm looking at this to be is an opportunity to fall in love with the world again. You know, a new edition is a chance to get back to do another dance with the one who brung ya.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really like about V5 is that it's not so much a new edition, but a reboot of the entire setting. Lots of the assumptions, and mechanically and setting-wise, it kind of reboots everything back to almost ground zero and start building up again. So where do we go from here, in a sense?
I have the same kind of impression of it. I really love that the assumption is that players are going to play these kind of street level vampires. You are assumed to be, kind of the default play now is that you're an anarch as opposed to defaulting to the Camarilla. So I think that there's a great opportunity to over time, kind of play had built up and the experience of being a vampire, you want to be a vampire so you feel apart from humanity. You want to feel whether it's a cut above or different. And when everyone in the coterie is a vampire, that's kind of tough to have your singular, to stand out like that. And so there was a sort of power creep that, players were, first we're going to play Ancillae, then we're going to play, move on to there from Elders, then we're going to get deeper and deeper into these sects. And the 5th edition is this great opportunity to kind of, as you say, hey, let's go back to the beginning. Let's start over. Let's start the character sheet at zero and once again kind of make our way into this wondrous new world. And so a lot of the work we're doing assumes that the player, whether they're a new player or a long-term player, is getting into the world and having a look at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you on to the podcast today was that last week saw some major announcements by World of Darkness. The core intellectual property development would be done in-house. Renegade Studios are the new publisher. Sensitive reviews for all future releases. The release of the Vampire the Masquerade Companion, as well as the return of Ravnos, Salubri, and Shamis, however you pronounce it.
It's good enough. It's a wide world of people saying Shamisi differently.
Yeah, but that's a lot to unpack. So I mean, reasons for Paradox and Wonders wanting to kind of bring their kind of core IP development back in house again.
Yeah, that's a great question. The biggest benefit to it is that as we're growing the World of Darkness as a brand, as we're building the intellectual property of it, what having a kind of central brain in-house lets us do is kind of define the universal truths for, what it means to be a vampire, what it means to be a werewolf, what it means to be, these various monster types in the World of Darkness. In the past, it had been done by, partners here, partners there. And so when someone was building a tabletop RPG, they weren't necessarily thinking about, I should make a concession to video games. I should write this from this perspective so we can be used in video games. They didn't necessarily care. They were just making a TTRPG because that was their business. Same for like a book publisher or a comic book publisher partner. They were working with the predominant assumption that, we make comic books, so we're going to write this story for comic books. But as we bring it all in-house, as we have the brand development happening in-house, we get to think about, okay, here's what's true of the brand, and this can be true of a TTRPG, and it can also be true for a video game. So there's a kind of holistic authenticity. Your experience in Vampire will be true whether you're playing a tabletop RPG or a video game or going to a LARP or reading a novel. And so that's really the strength it gives us there, is it lets us deliver a consistent, authentic experience to players and audiences.
So you're going for very much a multi-platform approach, and doing it in-house kind of bakes that into the core systems of the game and like the setting. Okay, what's that mean for World of Darkness going forward, and how will this decision kind of impact future releases and the development of World of Darkness?
One of the things that is really kind of pays off for the where we started. The tabletop RPG is really our kind of foundation for everything. So even though we're going to be making video games, kind of our square one is the TTRPG, and so there will continue to be TTRPG support. And in fact, we use the TTRPG in various forms of media to help them define what they're doing. So, when you come to us and say, oh, I want to make a video game, we can sit down together and say, great, here's what this is about. We can play a session of the TTRPG and, kind of work out some of the details. You as the video game dev is going to say, oh, great, I can work this system into the game. And we on our end of brand development say, hey, that's great, but remember, there's clans and there are different sects. So remember to get these important pieces of the experience in there. So we get like this really good kind of mutual symbiotic or ecological development between what the brand needs and what the individual expressions of transmedia is how we're looking at it really come together. So what does that mean for TTRPGs? It means there's going to be a lot of ongoing support for it because it's kind of our foundation for the entirety of everything.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's TTRPGs are going to be one of the core elements of the World of Darkness franchise, but you're not being solely focused on that platform. You're looking at all the potential platforms.
Correct. And this isn't a weird thing. This isn't an anomaly in games. When I was working at Ubisoft years ago, we took a tabletop kind of board game-ish prototype that we had pitched for another game, and so this really is an extension of that sort of thing. We get to take this thing that is a proven viable. Players are already playing the TTRPG and grow it into new media.
That's great. How did Renegade Studios get involved with Paradox and World of Darkness?
That's a good question too. Paradox is working with, or excuse me, Renegade is working with us on the Rivals card game.
Yeah.
And once we started talking about, we're already working together creatively on this. Separately, they had picked up some other properties of their own, and they were, starting from the ground up an RPG arm, but they've got some very experienced people in there working on it. Elisa Teague is their senior producer of RPG materials, and so we're already working together. You've got this initiative that's getting going, and Elisa is a White Wolf player from, she has plenty of experience with it. So the chocolate and the peanut butter came together, and it really worked out.
Great. So basically, it was just a meeting of minds and said, okay, let's build on this relationship and see what comes of it. That's great. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Vampire the Masquerade Companion was a bit of a surprise. I mean, it's going to be released next month and completely free. What can we expect to see in it?
So the Vampire the Masquerade Companion includes, as we were talking about earlier, some the clans themselves aren't new. They've always heard of the Vampire, but it's the first time we get to look at the 5th edition versions of the Ravnos, the Salubri, and the Shamisi clans. In addition to the clan material, there is some one of the things that I really like about 5th edition is that it assumes that the players are part of a coterie. And so we did an entire section on coteries from clan perspectives. So when you are a member of Clan X and you're in a coterie, what does that mean to the rest of the coterie? So there's some systems in there that you can opt into. There's some setting material that's in there. There's rules for playing a mortal. There's rules for playing ghouls. So there's a whole bunch of fun new stuff to work with. In terms of 5th edition presentation, there are new disciplines and discipline powers that help you realize the fantasy of those clans that are included in there. So the fact that we're giving it away for free is really just the cherry on top to me. So it's a great book. Oh, and here, just have it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, like, will that be released as a paper, actually a physical copy in the future at some point?
In discussion right now. In fact, we were just talking about it this morning. As it releases in December, it's going to be a PDF release, so we can get it basically into people's hands quickly. But we're also looking at opportunities to turn it into a print release.
I've heard a few people within like the fan community saying it's great it's being released free as a PDF, but just for I think it's the completest in them. They want the kind of that, the companion on their shelves. Just like, yeah, I've got it. Okay. There have been rumors that the Sabbat might be making a return to V5. Can we see some of that in the companion? Oh, for that matter, is it true? Will we see the Sabbat again?
I have never heard those rumors before. Actually, yes. I'll confirm that. In fact, I was just working on the Sabbat sect guide in the other room before we took this call. So yes, it is a piece of the vampire continuity that's in development. In terms of seeing it in the companion itself, not exactly. What we're doing with the clans there is kind of presenting them on their own terms. And so if you want to have, say, a Shemisi, you don't necessarily have to be a part of the Sabbat, even though historically they've been largely attached to the Sabbat. So again, this is part of that fresh look, right? We want everyone to be able to realize the clan fantasies, and then the kind of sect layer of things is something that gets put on top of it.
All right, so just because you're Shemisi does not automatically assume you are Sabbat. It's then open to player and game interpretation of how you want that game to be.
That is correct. That's correct.
Okay. Obviously, we see the return of Ravnos, Salubri, and Shemisi. How have these clans changed or been updated and revised for V5?
Great question. One of the things that we wanted to do as we bring them up to 5th edition standards is take the clans and make sure that they realize a particular fantasy. So one of the existing go back and we say, this is the clan as X, right? Or a vampire as X. So a Toreador is, the beautiful predator vampire. The Ventru is the consolidating power vampire. The Tremere is the vampire as a witch, or, a blood witch, a blood sorcerer. And so for the Ravnos and the Shemisi and the Salubri, we did that same thing. So the Ravnos look at the vampire idea as, a trickster, as someone who has maybe a little bit of Loki take on them, but that sort of deceiver aspect where the vampire is showing you what you want to see, and that's kind of their allure. That's what brings you to them. For the Salubri, it was the vampire both as someone who's hunted because they have a history of being pursued by those who want their blood, but also the vampire as someone who's seeking redemption. There's very few Salubri, and a lot of times the exit from salubriness is kind of moving past being a vampire, whether you're finding Golconda or whether you pass on that curse to someone else. It's about transcending being a vampire. And for the Shemisi, it's the vampire as the dragon. They've always been, Dracula is a Shemisi. Dracula means dragon or son of the dragon. And so the Shemisi are the vampires kind of on top of their hoard of collections, whether it's money or, their crumbling castle on top of the mountain, they are the one who possesses. They don't care if they win necessarily. They just want to have.
Yeah, that's making me smile a lot. I mean, when I ever played at Ravnos, I completely ignored most of the background material and just focused on of them being like tricksters and con artists and just deceivers, as you say. So I'm really pleased to hear that. I mean, as I recall, on Twitter earlier this year, you revealed that it was, I think you were the one behind the fall of Ravnos in the Week of Nightmares. Is that correct? So how does it feel to you killed off the Ravnos and now you're bringing them back? How does that feel?
It feels good. One of the things that I like about it, actually, about the fifth edition take, is really an opening of the clan concepts to fit more ideas. Over 30 years of development, kind of an IP takes on a certain amount of momentum. And again, what we're trying to do with the fifth edition is, let's break this down to its core, its essence, and open up the ideas. So, you don't have to necessarily pay attention to, the Week of Nightmares, etc. If you just want vampire as trickster, it's totally playable that way. If you want to take in all of that legacy knowledge, it's playable that way too. And I think, as players start to see how we've written, the clan weaknesses, the banes, the compulsions, they're totally playable if you don't know anything about the past, but if you do know the lore, I think the Ravnos Bane in particular is going to make some remind people of what it means to be a Ravnos.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. 'Cause like I said, I just loved playing the Ravnos. There's something so innately fun about playing, like the Loki-esque trickster. You actually, one thing I want to ask you about, you made an interesting comment playing human in V5 Companion. Are we going to be seeing, like, when I was reading the V5 core rulebook, the thing that really stood out to me was the Second Inquisition. Are we ever going to get to play like Second Inquisition hunters in like the V5 World of Darkness?
So I can't commit to long-term schedule right now, but one of the things that I'm really trying to help communicate is that Second Inquisition is not an organization. It's more of an event. The Second Inquisition is happening, and so it's happening because any number of mortal groups here and there are figuring out, oh my gosh, vampires exist and we need to stop them. So you can be a vampire hunter who's in the FBI or the CIA, or you can be a vampire hunter who is a plumber and was, went to a client's house and figured out, oh, there's something really weird about this. And so, you went back to the headquarters, and you went back to the office and got the other plumbers all, good to go. And so both of those are expressions of the Second Inquisition. These are the burning times again. Right now, mortals are becoming aware of vampires, and they are rising up to stop them at the same time that the beckoning and the Gehenna War is happening. It's really a dangerous and therefore exciting time to be a vampire, but it's also an awesome time to be a hunter.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I was like reading the Second Inquisition movement, it felt a lot like this 90s British television series called Ultraviolet, which was basically a department of the British government that had become completely secret, been aware of that had become aware of vampires and was hunting them, actively hunting them down. Was that a touchstone of yours, or was that completely missed?
The show for me, I haven't ever seen it, but so many people recommend it to me. But it
Yeah.
sounds like that the crux of the idea is there, right? Like this is, as a government agency, this is a really well-funded group of vampire hunters, and that's absolutely part of it too. So we want kind of that, even humbler beginnings. You don't have a chaos scope and a automatic rifle. You've got a board with a nail in it and your plumber's wrench, and let's hope you see the next sunrise, right?
Yeah, there is that certain desperation,
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
in being a hunter. Okay. Where do we go from here? Where does V5 and World of Darkness go from here? I mean, you mentioned the beckon. I'm going to see more about this beckoning and what it means, and how it kind of the impact it will have on World of Darkness.
So the beckoning was kind of the first wave of these elders in the setting, kind of hearing this call and being pulled away. And no one really knows what the beckoning is or where it's taking them. But there's definitely a correlation between the beckoning and the Gehenna War that's happening. The Gehenna War has almost completely destroyed the Sabbat, and so what remains of the Sabbat is this again similarly desperate sect on the ropes doing what it needs to survive. And so there's some connection there. I would definitely look forward to that coming up in the future, a little more detail there. But even beyond that, again, I don't want to tease the schedule too far, but there is very much a sense of us wanting to make sure that Vampire makes its complete offering available to players, and there are many different ways to play a vampire. So, look at my focus, having come back to the World of Darkness, is very much on putting choices in front of players. The World of Darkness is about these opportunities for action. There's a lot less focus on, this happened 1,000 years ago and this happened 300 years ago. It's very much like, this is happening in your city now, go. And so there will be a fresh look at, hey, what can you do now? What can you do tonight?
Make it more immediate. Make like the consequences more imminent.
That's a fantastic word choice. Consequence is such an important part of the World of Darkness, right? You, as a vampire, kill a mortal. Well, there are consequences for that, right? There's every choice you have has an outcome that you're going to be responsible for, and that's true across the World of Darkness, not even just vampire there.
Okay. You said like the Sabbat was kind of like on its last stand. In fact, it feels like the Sabbat have gone from like a major sect to being more like, a fundamentalist terrorist organization, like a really extremist organization where it's small, but when it kind of does something, it leaves a big mark. Would that be a fair analogy?
We'll definitely be looking more into what it means to see, to have the Sabbat experience going forward.
Yeah.
But even what's in print right now kind of alludes to this, right? The Sabbat is probably the sect that has most suffered at the hands of this, the burning times emerging again. That this is the era of the Second Inquisition. Oh, and at the same time, the Sabbat is being pulled away. Its attention is drawn by this Gehenna War, and so it is a very it's the espresso of vampires at this point. It's the tight, potent, very effective fundamentalist is a good choice of words there.
Okay. One thing I wanted to ask, like, when developing V5 and going for, do you have any games you reference as being a point of inspiration?
One of the things that we really enjoy about the fifth edition is being able to the narrative. It's right there in the storytelling system, storyteller system name, right? We're going to be telling stories together. And so one of the things I enjoy is moving more of the ability to have influence over the narrative from the storyteller to kind of around the table. So systemically, in the past, we've had this idea where, the storyteller is the dictator and they are going to tell the story and everyone else is kind of the actors on the stage. But right now, I really enjoy systems that move things out more to the players. You can take risk more as a player. I love the hunger mechanics, for example, because they've taken the idea of blood away from a resource management game and made it more almost literary, where I'm going to do this thing. I'm having a panic because I'm starving right now, which kind of creates these wonderful emergent situations that now everyone at the table has to deal with. We were going to Elysium to present ourselves because we're supposed to, and now what happened, right? And so that's, I think, is the beauty of some of the more modern design that's in the systems there.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few people. Everyone loves the feeding mechanics. Like the need. It's no longer about tracking blood. It's about tracking your need to feed, and you're never ever completely sated unless you actually completely drain someone.
And that's wonderful. I mean, that's just so critical to being a vampire, right?
Exactly. It's just systemically. It just embeds in you are a vampire and you need to. It's not about needing blood. Just you need to feed. And basically the very that essence into the system. So it was just blown away by it. So really, really impressed.
And it gives you a lot of room to press your luck, for you to decide, oh, I really want to use this, this discipline right now to make things go my way. I'm hungry, do I want to risk the frenzy here? Do I want to risk, even the messy critical, right? I succeed, but it's got consequences again, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like you just kind of you take your chances and you know what's coming, but you might get lucky. So do you want to risk it? And it's just on that knife edge. And again, which is the essence of being a vampire. Yeah, 2020 hasn't been the best year for many people. Anyone, to be honest. But so how was like kind of COVID-19 and lockdown affected V5 and World Darkness?
Unfortunately, it has a lot of kind of cascade effects, right? And so, printing takes a longer time, and even sourcing, materials to print too takes a longer time. But one of the things that we've been fortunate with is with the ability to kind of create the game content, it hasn't disrupted our flow as much there. So for me, literally being on work from home, as Paradox is, I get up every morning, I make my breakfast, and then immediately, get into, my drafts for Companion or for Shabbat or for things that are coming up. And it reminds me a lot of how we used to do things, back in the day at White Wolf, except right now, there's a lot more access to, player feedback. We're seeing firsthand, these players are running this stream, so here's how people are using what we're doing. So there really is a much more immediate sense of how the stuff is, and it really hasn't affected our ability to generate the content, at least in a sense of that's part of why we're giving away the PDF immediately for free, because we can, because there's immediate digital fulfillment there.
Yeah, it's like it's there and players can start using it immediately and become embedded within the game. Yeah, it's really good. Going forward, I've heard like several people saying, like pharmaceutical CEOs saying by this time next year, COVID-19 things will be back to normal. The vaccine will be out there, we'll be immunized, things are going to get back to normal. How will COVID-19 and the lockdown have kind of taught, and that's necessarily taught, but will Paradox and will Dogs learned anything from this experience, and will it influence it moving forwards?
One of the things that we're learning is how to streamline the process and how to kind of decentralize and work remotely. I think anybody who's working in a kind of office or team environment is having to do that. One of the larger concerns too, at least for the brand, World of Darkness is a contemporary brand. It happens in our world. And so right now, if quarantine and lockdowns and things stretch on for another year, that is radically going to alter the face of vampire. So much, if you look at its history, is about hanging out and brooding in the nightclub, right? And if you can't go to the nightclubs anymore, what does that mean for vampires, right? How does a vampire hunt in an era of lockdown? While there is personal distancing, what does that mean to someone who's stalking you through the darkness? And so, I don't want to linger on those sorts of things because right now they are fresh and they are tragic and people are having to deal with them firsthand. But if this, extends and becomes the new normal, what does that mean for vampires?
Yeah, so basically, how does a vampire hunt when no one's going out?
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, and I have to ask this. Given V5 and the announcement of a 5th edition for Werewolf the Apocalypse, will we ever see a 5th edition of Mage the Ascension?
Let's not rule anything out. I will not confirm. I will not deny. But let's say specifically that I am the brand creative lead for the World of Darkness. I'm not the brand creative lead for Vampire and Werewolf only.
Oh, okay, then take that as we shall. Take it as we will. Okay, then. Because, love Vampire, love Werewolf, but Mage. There's something about Mage that just keeps drawing me back to it. It's a one game in the World of Darkness that actually has a concept of hope. Bend word with you, because you have the power to change reality, and yeah.
Well, I think hope scales. Certainly, there's an amount of hope in the Salubri, right? You can potentially transcend what it means to be a vampire. Ultimately, looking back at Werewolf the Apocalypse and Werewolf 20, and it's about fighting this doomed fight because it's the right thing to do. Even if you don't necessarily win the war, you can win some meaningful battles. So hope is you need hope in the World of Darkness, because if it's all darkness and there's no light, what are you playing for, right?
That's excellent. Thank you very much for joining me today, Justin. So thank you everyone for listening. I have been Peter Ray Allison, speaking to Justin Achillie, and for the Geek Pride podcast. Stay safe, everyone, and take care of each other. Goodbye.